Yes, indeed, it is once again time for another episode of the Kanika Sports Show, everybody. I am your host, Kenny Time, on this microphone, and I am joined once again, as always, by the one, the only. Drumroll, please. Nika, the producer, everybody. Welcome, Nika.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Kenny. How is everybody doing on this Wednesday afternoon? It is afternoon.
It is Wednesday afternoon, and
We're coming with the specials today.
Yeah, we brought
specials.
We had to bring out the mics because we had some actual breaking news happen yesterday that kind of sent the world of baseball into a free-for-all. Yes, Nika? Is that the best way to put it?
It started with some frenzies.
All right, well, let's cue it up.
Okay, what are we queuing up?
Breaking news.
Oh, breaking news. Well, I don't know.
Nika, we just talked about this before we went on the air, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
This bullet just handed to me.
And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
You heard the man.
Listen.
I need you to stop what you're doing and listen up, everybody. We had some news yesterday of, I guess, it's about as big as it gets, right?
Yes. In our world, at least.
The first tweet that I saw come out from Major League Baseball was at 1:18 p.m. yesterday, May 13th, 2025. And it said Major League Baseball issues policy decision on permanent ineligibility status after death. I think the wording of this was really interesting just off the get-go. Even in this, like, what do you call this? A subheading or a caption underneath a picture, maybe.
Okay.
Like it's kind of like the caption for the story. And this whole status after death is important, I think, context in what happened yesterday, because a lot of people are jumping the shark and saying inaccurate things. Let's read this statement. If you flip to the next one, you can see it says, in response to a petition from the family of Pete Rose, Commissioner Robert D. Manfred Jr. today issued a policy decision regarding the status of 17 individuals who passed away while on the permanently ineligible list. Excerpts of a letter to the lawyer for the Rose family included, quote, the question of whether an individual should remain on the permanently ineligible list after his death has never been formally addressed by Major League Baseball. Indeed, Mr. Rose is the first person banned by a commissioner other than Kennesaw Mountain Landis to die while still on the ineligible list. As such, it is incumbent upon the office of the commissioner to reach a policy decision regarding this unprecedented issue in the modern era. So as you can see here, we're getting news regarding Pete Rose, and we've been kind of knowing that this was going to be coming down the pipeline 2 weeks ago. I believe we even told you here on our show that Manfred was set to meet with President Trump about this very issue. And today is Pete Rose Day at Cincinnati Reds Stadium against the White Sox, which is kind of ironic. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think the family of Pete Rose had asked the commissioner to please make a decision one way or the other about this before this game tonight.
Okay, so that was their line in the sand in a way.
Well, not a line in the sand. I think they just were hoping that, now that Pete Rose had died last year, if feelings could be changed or if any. And this is an interesting angle to take here because, we're going to continue reading here. On the next slide,
okay.
The statement continued that was released. It said, in my view, once an individual has passed away, the purpose of Rule 21 has been served. And little interjection here. Rule 21 is about basically gambling on any game that you are a player or a manager or anything else involved within, umpire, whatever. Rule 21 has been served. Obviously, a person no longer with us cannot represent a threat to the integrity of the game. Moreover, it is hard to conceive of a penalty that has more deterrent effect than one that lasts a lifetime with no reprieve. Therefore, I have concluded that permanent ineligibility ends upon the passing of the disciplined individual, and Mr. Rose will be removed from the permanently ineligible list. Huge news. Huge news. I want to emphasize that it is not part of my authority or responsibility to express any view concerning Mr. Rose's consideration by or possible election to the Hall of Fame. I agree with Commissioner Giamatti, that's A. Bartlett Giamatti, who was the commissioner who suspended Pete Rose. Manfred says, I agree with Commissioner Giamatti that responsibility for that decision lies with the Hall of Fame, which is a separate body. It's not necessarily a part of Major League Baseball, even though it is. It has its own kind of panel, I guess. It has its own people involved.
Okay, so it has its own governing body. It doesn't fall under Manfred.
Correct.
rules.
It's basically like the Hall of Fame basically has always had this stance that they don't vote upon members who have been banned.
Okay.
So now by unbanning Pete Rose because he's died, it opens him up for eligibility again in the eyes of how it's been laid out in previous years. So this is huge news, obviously, with regards to baseball, and an interesting way to go about this kind of conundrum. You know, you have a situation where you have the all-time hits leader, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. And it's like, how can it be a true representation of greatness when the person who has the most hits is not in the Hall of Fame? This is going to become a topic more and more, too, because you have a whole another list of people that have never participated in gambling per se, but did use performance-enhancing drugs that have also been punished by the Hall of Fame. So we'll be talking about that as we go along with this. But today, we are really focused in on this gambling issue.
Okay.
Because this happened in my lifetime, you know, and I remember even as a kid when it happened, like the shame of it, and that, you know, I saw him accepting this lifetime ban that I don't think he ever thought was going to last, Pete Rose. I don't think he necessarily took the punishment as serious as it was when it was handed out at the time.
Okay.
I think he thought eventually they would cave and lift it, or because he had the hits, he had the title, you know, and I think he just thought eventually it would get removed and lifted and cleared up and or have his name cleared and made glorified again, I guess.
Well, we saw the documentary about him, you know, and we thought at that moment that will kind of help clear his name as well.
That's a great plug by Nika there. We did watch the Charlie Hustle documentary on HBO Max, as it's now once again called as of today. And we did do a deep dive review of that last year on our podcast when we were still just audio only. But if you want to go hear any of those comments, feel free to go back and listen to those old episodes, no doubt. It was a great documentary, and, you know, it left me even feeling conflicted about how to feel about this whole situation because, you know, on the one hand, I do feel like the baseball accomplishments are worthy of being included.
Sure.
I guess I just had a hard time watching him sometimes interact with other people and, you know, still kind of try to skirt away from some of the responsibility, I guess, of it.
So it's more of the field behavior, not on the field behavior that he's being punished for.
Yeah, but also just not showing remorse for the situation.
Sure.
I don't know. We're not going to get into this right now because we already did, and we talked about it at length last year. But I guess the documentary kind of left me conflicted about the whole thing. And I think one of the most interesting things that happened yesterday is how this has happened, actually, which is this whole once you die, it's kind of over. You know, it's a lifetime ban. It's not a lifetime and
forever
eternity ban. It doesn't say that. It never has.
Right.
And so I wonder if Rob Manfred and his probably late agonizing nights thinking, how am I going to deal with this situation if someone lawyered up to him one day and gave him this brilliant idea. Like, what if you don't do anything at all? And all you do is just change from or just play upon the word lifetime and say, once the life is over, the lifetime ban is also over. And it's an easy sort of way to just lift the responsibility from your office now, or from the future office of the commissioner in these kinds of instances.
And yeah, that's a good point, because that way you're not disrespecting the decisions that came before yours.
Right, you're not. You're standing by those words, lifetime ban.
Right.
And you know, we'll get into a lot of this as the show goes on, but isn't that the true punishment?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to punish a guy after he's dead for? Or maybe
his
4
legacy
is not the right reason, but I guess why the continued like torture? You know, like it's like the guy has nothing left to suffer anymore.
Well, he's no longer with us.
Of course.
And I think this is more for his family and people that are close to him more than him at this point.
Well, this was huge news yesterday, Nika, and I feel like people are going to be talking about this until he's in the damn Hall of Fame, if that winds up happening, because that's not guaranteed yet, as you can see at the end of this letter. And you know, I think that's important too, is the commissioner wants nothing to do with that decision. He's making this ruling based on a technicality, right? Sure. Well, they're dead. So technically the lifetime ban is over. We're moving on. We're moving on with this presentation because shortly after this news break, I saw this come across my feed, and I do follow Bob Nightingale, but this is going to be a doozy because I found a lot of disagreements with myself and his article that came out yesterday. But this is what started it. This was the tweet. Dark day for baseball. I eye rolled at the time. MLB's shock decision on Pete Rose could open the floodgates.
To what?
Color me curious here, Nika, I guess is the best way to put it, because I was like, what does he mean, open the floodgates? You know, and
was there more than one Pete Rose?
Well, I mean, there were other players yesterday that had their lifetime bans ended, that some have been dead for many, 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 many years, like 70, 80 years.
Yeah. There was 17 players total.
Oy. Anyways, the headline is also attention grabbing. Dark day for baseball. So if you flip over to the actual article, I opened this up, and this is what I was greeted with. It's Bob Nightingale, and you can see right next to his nameplate at the very top, it says opinion. So we know this is an opinion piece. I feel like it was motivated a little bit, but we'll get into that as we go. The headline reads, "Dark day for baseball," in quotes. I want to point that out. That is a quote from somebody, so he's not editorializing and saying this. Somebody in his editorial is, though, and we're going to find out who that is shortly. The subheading, MLB's shock decision on Pete Rose could open floodgates. So a similar headline to the X posting here. And I clipped the first opening paragraph because I found this to be such an embellishment. It says, apparently it's okay to gamble on baseball now, even those involving your own team, while making a mockery out of the sport's most sacred rule. Okay, Bob. I wanted to hear what he had to say. So, Nika, can you cue up the video of him, please?
Sure.
And all of a sudden, he's now eligible to be in the Hall of Fame for the first time since he was suspended by baseball permanently in 1989. Well, permanently has been scrubbed now because he died last year, and Commissioner Rob Manfred said everybody to see.
We just went over this, Bob. We just went over this. Lifetime ban. His life is over. Ban is over.
Well, maybe he is banned in the post life. I don't understand this.
I guess it's just like, is this woeful ignorance to not read what the actual statement said and just run with your own feelings on the matter? Okay, well, let's continue with this.
East, who's been banned before, is now reinstated by Major League Baseball. Yes, this means everybody, 17 people involved in the 1919 Black Sox scandal when players deliberately threw games.
Let's pause.
Yes.
So yes, this was news at the time to me because I think the Pete Rose decision, I don't necessarily, I had not necessarily connected the dots that like if a decision was made about Pete Rose, it would also have impact on other players, including the great legendary Shoeless Joe Jackson, who of course is the subject matter in the movie Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner, a baseball classic that we see on MLB Network like 8 to 10 times every year. We have a Field of Dreams game, for gosh sakes, in Iowa now, though not every year as it should be. We also have the 8 Men Out movie, which had like D.B. Sweeney and John Cusack and Michael Rooker, like a bunch of other actors, young up-and-coming stars. Just a great actors movie, you know, with a bunch of Chicago actors in it from the late 80s. Loved that movie. The ending scene is great. Might talk about it a little bit more later, but, you know, I never even saw the fact that this decision with Pete Rose would impact the 1919 White Sox.
Yeah,
That is
we didn't put it two and two together, basically.
well, and it all has to do with this ruling. Like these men were banned for gambling on games and throwing games intentionally and taking money for it, and they are dead. And they've been dead for a really long time. They played baseball in the 19 teens.
So over 100 years.
Yes. So the fact that
That's punishment.
this lifetime ban has extended way beyond the course of the life now. So I think this was a really smart decision by Rob Manfred, actually, to take this role in it because, like I said, he's basing this on a technicality of a wording, and it's a very lawyery thing to do, and it's a very smart way of going about it because he does not have to have any involvement with the Hall of Fame proceedings that are going to come next.
Very true.
All right, let's finish up Bob's video, please.
Black Sox scandal when players deliberately threw games. Yes, this means that Shoeless Joe Jackson can be in the Hall of Fame. Eddie Chilcott can be in the Hall of Fame. So Pete Rose will be on the Hall of Fame ballot, the Veterans Committee ballot, in 2027. The fear now by this decision is that it opens the floodgates for everybody.
All right, pause this for a second. So you notice what he said there? He said Players Committee, did he? Not? And you notice he didn't say baseball writers.
Right.
And I just want you to remember that. Please hold that thought as we go through this article that he wrote after this, because this video is just setting the tone, everybody. It's just a tone setter, but you can kind of tell that Bob is not really thrilled about this.
Okay. So he's taking personally.
Seems to be a
Seems
little
that
bit,
way.
right? All right, let's finish up what he's got to say here about opening up the floodgates, because this is what I really wanted to figure out what he meant by this before this article even started. Okay,
right.
let's go.
Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Alex Rodriguez, who had a year-one drug suspension, Manny Ramirez, on and on. It opens the door, potentially, for a whole lot of folks. If Rose gets in after violating the cardinal rule in sports by gambling on the sport, in this case, gambling while he was manager of the Cincinnati Reds, why in the world would it stop people from using steroids to get in, whether you were caught or not? So, historic day in baseball. The way you look at it, could be a very dark day in baseball, too. This is Bob Nightingale from USA Today Sports. Rose has been...
All right. Well, that's the article, and one day I will remember to leave those frame holds on the end of the videos I make for Nika, so she can actually pause it before the video restarts. But yeah, so this is Bob's top of the article, like video introduction, I guess, to this whole presentation. And you can just tell he's a little bit irritated, and it's like going to open up the doors to all this stuff. How do you want to start? Like, should we address the steroid comparison?
Sure.
So my issue with the steroid comparison is that it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Rob Manfred did not change anything involving that, and neither did the Hall of Fame, as far as I can tell.
No, the rules haven't changed. Just the wording of the lifetime, the meaning of the lifetime change. It's not even changed.
If you get popped for PEDs, you still get a 80-game suspension, right?
Right.
If you get popped for PEDs twice, you still get suspended for 162 games, a full season.
Profar.
Well, he's got one.
Well,
So he
whatever,
got the
but
80 games.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if you get caught a third time, it's for life. So those rules are still intact. Nothing's changed.
You still
They're
cannot
gonna-
gamble.
You're still going to have the shame of it. You're still going to have, everyone knows Fernando got popped. Everyone knows Profar got popped. Everyone knows.
But you also remember when Otani and his translator got popped for gambling.
Well,
But you still cannot gamble. Nothing has changed about
of
that.
course. And that would have been a big story because of the gambling aspect of it.
Exactly.
I don't think anyone is saying here, Bob, that we can just start gambling on games tomorrow and just
No.
start loading up with steroids till our heart's content and no one will care anymore.
That's not
this
what
is
that's
not what this is saying. Like, if you get caught gambling on baseball tomorrow, you can still get banned for life for doing it. Not could. You would if you
Yeah.
were caught red-handed. We saw an umpire, one of the best in the game, whose friend used the same FanDuel account or some shit as him, and he wound up getting kicked out permanently. And that's not changing.
Right.
They're not going to just invite this guy back. And you know what? He had the best strike percentage calls in all of Major League Baseballs, and he was one of their best umpires. He's not coming back.
Yeah.
So I just don't buy this argument. You know, like the rules have not changed here for anybody. The floodgates are not opening for anybody as far as I'm concerned. And if you want proof, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens were already on the damn ballot, and they didn't get elected in.
Oh, yeah. He forgot about that part.
Pete Rose was never on the ballot.
So it's more about
Joe Jackson
his-
did have opportunities twice, you found, in 1936 and 1946, I believe, but never under the stain of like being reinstated.
Right.
And the Hall of Fame has always said we're not going to put players in the Hall of Fame that are banned from baseball.
Yeah.
So these were all technicalities at some point, right? The technicalities have changed. And I said something about Bob being a writer and the players committee. And if you notice that while he and his other buddies got to vote on who gets in the Hall of Fame, and they still will going forward, they will have that power to vote. They don't have this power with a players committee. They never played the game. When it comes to this election, it is not up to them. And I wonder if that's why there's some disdain here or some backlash because they feel like their opinion isn't being heard in the matter.
Oh, so this is a control issue, most likely.
Well, I'm just saying it could be playing into the overall tone of the messaging
Yeah,
here.
you're
As a
taking away-
journalist,
yeah.
an opinionist, let's be honest, he's not even a journalist. He writes editorials for a living. Those are opinions, people. Those are not necessarily the record of fact.
No, those are his opinions.
So I take issue with a lot of editorialists who call themselves journalists because journalists are the note of record. And this is when you're putting your opinion out there, that's not a matter of fact anymore.
It's not.
All right. Well, I want to get into this article now.
Okay.
You got the next slide up?
Yep.
All right. Just to remind everyone, the first sentence I'm going to go back and read. It says, apparently it's okay to gamble on baseball now, even those involving your own team, while making a mockery out of the sport's most sacred rule. And that is, of course, rule number 21, which we just discussed. No player, umpire, coach, manager, anything, trainer will bet on baseball because they have knowledge that other people do not have about their team, the sport, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Ready?
Yeah.
All right. It says, you want to cheat, lie, go to prison for tax evasion, and be accused of statutory rape. Hey, all is forgiven.
What?
All right. What an overdramatic statement. Nobody is saying that. Nobody has said that out loud. What? This is such a leap to conclusions. It's like, you don't like the guy. I get it. You don't like Pete Rose, but this is all your personal feelings on the person. It has nothing to do with the issue at hand. And again, I know the Rose family and the situation with him is what caused all of this to happen. But Rob Manfred went about this in a smart way, and you don't like that.
Yeah.
You don't like that. You learn in journalism school that you can't libel the dead. Yeah, you didn't learn a lot in journalism school, Bob. I can tell you that, as this article I'm about to read is unleashed for our audience. Who knew that once you're dead, all could be forgiven too? Pete Rose, who gambled on baseball as manager of the Cincinnati Reds and lied about it for 15 years before dying September 2024 at the age of 83, had his Hall of Fame chances resurrected by Commissioner Rob Manfred. So the language is just resurrection. It's like being compared to Christ on the cross. Like, does that mean Pete Rose was crucified before? Is that what you're saying there, Bob? I mean, if one is true, the opposite has to be true, right?
He's leaping to a lot of conclusions there.
I don't think anyone is asking for Pete Rose's lifetime of deeds to be forgiven, right?
No.
I haven't seen that argument being made. I haven't seen people like another thing too is like, what does tax evasion have to do with the Hall of Fame? Like,
I don't know.
Is Wesley Snipes barred from making movies anymore because he went to jail for tax evasion?
Martha Stewart is back on TV.
She's on TV. I mean, like, it's these like character assassination things where it's like you want to point out other things outside of baseball that happened with this person and then use that against them to judge them.
Yeah.
Like, it's not supposed to be about that. I think if you went through a lot of people in the Hall of Fame and went through their off-season character analysis, you would find a lot of flaws in a lot of these people, and yet you don't see him writing about them day after day after day after day. So it's the fact that Pete Rose committed this sin against baseball in Rule 21 that really has you bent up in arms. And instead of addressing like what Manfred said, you go right away for the low-hanging fruit with the character assassination stuff.
Yeah. And why is that?
It's because they don't have anything else, and they don't have an opinion in this. So they're trying right now, right from the start, to plant the seed that Pete Rose does not belong in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
he's already planting that seed right now, and you're going to see later when it pays off. Let's continue the article. Manfred announced on the eve of Pete Rose Day in Cincinnati that he is lifting Rose's permanent ban from baseball and for the first time will be eligible to be elected into the Hall of Fame. Manfred, while ruling that the permanent ineligibility of players ends upon their death, also cleared everyone from the 1919 Black Sox scandal who deliberately fixed games during the World Series.
Okay.
So right away, you know today is Pete Rose Day in Cincinnati, and ironically, they are playing the White Sox. I think this is even more fitting that he did this. And as you can see, the ruling that Rob Manfred made opened up the floodgates for these gambling punishments that were handed out up, as you can see, more than 100 years ago as this goes back. And baseball was really different back then, obviously. But one of the things that was happening at the time was there was other gambling issues at the time, and those players were not punished as harshly. This story was the culmination of a lot of gambling activity. Like, there's even stories about Tris Speaker and Ty Cobb supposedly making a wager about something. And it's like, how could you not have the great Ty Cobb in the Hall of Fame, everybody? You know, so the fact of the matter is these players were made an example out of for something that was a problem in the game. And revenue sharing issues were a problem between ownership and players, even all the way back to the turn of the century in 1900. I remember Ken Burns' Chapter 1 documentary, the 9-part original series. The end of the first part, it ended right at 1900 in the timeline. And it said, baseball was a business now.
Okay.
And as soon as it became a business, it became capitalist. And it was always going to be about how can we make the most money. And that includes not paying your workers And that's why there's a players union today. And all these things have happened over so long of a time. And they fought for that players union. They fought to have it.
So basically, all the revenue that was coming in, the players wouldn't receive it. Mostly it went to the owners.
It does. Just like the Pittsburgh Pirates owners are still doing today, according to Bob Nightingale's previous column.
Oh.
You know, that's another thing. We don't talk about the fact that I'm getting a phone call. All good with the video?
Yeah.
We don't talk about the fact that the owners kind of get a scapegoat in all of this, you know? We don't talk about the fact that there was a scene in 8 Men Out of old man Comiskey supposedly screwing Eddie Seacoat. Is that, I say his name right? Seacott, sorry. Even I make mistakes. Eddie Seacott talking with old man Comiskey in his office saying like, hey, I won 29 games. I'm supposed to get a $10,000 bonus if I win 30. You benched me for 5 games in August. I would have gotten the win in one of those 5 games. You owe me that bonus. And he says, no, I owe what's best for the Chicago White Sox. Typical capitalism answer. Mm-hmm. All the way back in 1919. So there's different information about whether this scene in the movie really happened or not. But I think it was always just put in there as an example of the type of ownership that existed at the time in professional sports. And it still exists to this day. You know, we still have a cheap ownership problem in Major League Baseball. And if you don't believe me, just ask Pirates fans how they feel.
Remember, we were talking about the Cubs.
Ask Rockies fans how they feel about the ownership's spending habits. I mean,
yeah, they don't spend.
They don't. And back then, they didn't spend on their players. Mm-hmm. You know, like they didn't even have any, like they did have high priced talent back then. The White Sox did. But were they earning the same share of revenue that they earn today? No, not by a long shot. So, anyways, this is interesting, and I want to keep going.
Okay.
The next slide here, it's a little bit smaller print, but it says, this is where the article kind of got interesting for me because all of a sudden Marcus Giamatti is being quoted, and Marcus Giamatti is the son of A. Bartlett Giamatti, who was the commissioner in 1990, who suspended Pete Rose for life. I even had a 1990 Topps baseball card of him. Now, some context before we get into this I think is important. A. Bartlett Giamatti died 8 days after suspending Pete Rose for life. And I think Marcus and also his brother, Paul Giamatti, the famous actor, is...
Oh, they are brothers, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
And their dad was the one that suspended Pete Rose for life. And I think, as you're going to hear some of the comments here, that endeavor and having to go through that as commissioner really stressed their dad out, and they kind of blame him dying early on this a little bit.
Okay. That could happen.
So he says, quote, "It's a serious, dark day for baseball," quote, Marcus Giamatti, the 63-year-old son of late former Commissioner Bart Giamatti, who permanently suspended Rose in 1989, told USA Today Sports, quote, "For my dad, it was all about defending the integrity of baseball. Now, without integrity, I believe the game of baseball as we know it will cease to exist. How, without integrity, will the fans ever entrust the purity of the game? Oh, I don't know. The fact that the players can still get suspended for life for gambling on it, and that rule hasn't changed, and that if you get caught gambling, you will never, ever get elected into the Hall of Fame while you still have blood coursing through your veins. Period. End of story. Maybe we can start with that instead of over-dramatizing the situation."
Oh, that'd be nice.
He goes on, quote, "The basic principle that the game is built on, fair play, and that integrity is going to be compromised, and the fans are losers. I don't know how a fan could go and watch a game knowing that what they're seeing may not be real and fair anymore. That's a really scary thought." I don't understand where this argument is coming from. What is changing? You're just saying a bunch of platitudes here, and you're using your feelings about one person possibly getting now elected into the Hall of Fame after being banned for life, and you're using it to say that the entire game and the entire history of it is compromised? That's a big overreach
That's a
to
leap.
get. And I just feel like this is purposefully put at the top of this article, and they opened with this as the lead for this guy. And I'm not discounting how he feels about his dad and his role in all of this and everything. I'm not. I just feel like this is a big leap to be making here because we haven't changed the rules.
I love how this is becoming opinion, somebody's opinion versus reality.
If Aaron Judge got caught gambling on games tomorrow, he would be suspended for life. End of story. You would not ever see him at a major league game ever again in your lifetime.
Drama. That's how they like to be promoted. TV shows, anything is around from the mainstream media. More drama, more bickering about things that don't matter.
I mean, do you find it suspect at all that a columnist for USA Today has the eldest son of the former, now deceased commissioner just on standby, ready to quote about this? I mean, do you think that's a coincidence at all? This was put out less than 2 hours after this announcement by Major League Baseball.
Oh, that's quick.
That is fast.
That's fast.
I just feel like they were like waiting for years or something for this story to happen and just waiting to go nuclear on it.
So-
because they're about to go nuclear on this man. They haven't even started to go nuclear on Pete Rose yet.
Wow.
And
All
this
right.
this is all about Pete Rose. Make no mistake about it.
But-
And the funny thing is the commissioner's announcement, while was enticed by Rose's family, has nothing to do with Pete Rose. It just says if you've been banned for baseball, when your life ends, your banishment ends. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a parade like of people like, welcome back. You don't get that. You got suspended for life. You're dead. You never get welcomed back.
Yeah.
Can we go to the next slide? At the bottom here, you'll see it says, if Rose, who produced a record 4,256 hits, winds up in Cooperstown, Giamatti says, what stops Shoeless Joe and anyone else from the Black Sox? Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, come on in. Alex Rodriguez, let's forget about your year-long drug suspension. The 2017 Houston Astros, you had immunity anyway.
But that's two different issues. Why we are mudding the water with two different issues?
Oh, there is so much wrong in this small little paragraph.
And they wonder why people call it fake news. Everything.
And keep in mind, he says this is Giamatti saying this. So he's not the one actually saying this at this time, although he said similar stuff in his video at the top. But
So when did he interview Giamatti?
that's what I mean. Like, he had this big, long article ready to go within 2 hours of this news kind of breaking. I think they all knew it was coming. I think they knew it was
They
coming,
might have,
and they got some kind of warning.
So they wrote an article 5 months.
Not 5 months, but maybe like a couple hours. They might have found out at like 7 a.m. that morning and had enough time to do this during that day.
Okay.
He's a columnist. He just writes his opinions every day. He's not in the clubhouse interviewing players. I
No.
mean, he's Arizona-based from what I know. So he's mostly hanging out at Diamondbacks games. And guess what? They're in San Francisco. So I think he had a lot of time on his hands yesterday. So let's get into it. We went over the Black Sox scandal a little bit. We talked about some of the problems with it. Some of the other problems are the fact that the World Series that they got accused of throwing, Shoeless Joe Jackson hit for .375 batting average, hit the only home run for either team in the entire series, and did not make one error in the field, which cannot be said the same about his teammates. who were really throwing the games. They did make errors. They did play badly. This is one of those things where I think like we're never going to know for sure, but I think there's enough hearsay and enough just time that has gone by for this to be like, I don't know. Since I was a kid, it was always portrayed to me through Field of Dreams, through 8 Men Out, that Joe Jackson was a victim.
Okay.
That
of
he
the
was-
circumstances.
He was uneducated. You know, he didn't even go to like high school or anything. Couldn't write. You know, like couldn't even sign his own name weirdly. Like
No?
I don't. There was some weird stories about this.
Okay.
But the point of the matter is like it's 19 teens.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even have like a public school system that I'm aware of yet, where you had to go to high school.
No.
Like, I mean, these men were working in the fields and farming and doing like manual labor.
Well, right. They weren't just baseball players.
Right.
Baseball was their hobby in a way.
And you're still talking about something that when you talk about being a professional athlete in 1919,
There was no
was
such thing.
new.
Yeah.
It was only like less than 50 years old at the time. It was never a job before. Think about that. All the jobs that existed before then were probably pretty similar or the same as to what existed the generations before, because the same things were just needed: food, water,
That's it.
villages, housing.
Roads.
We weren't even in like some states. We had like 30 states in this time.
That's, yeah.
So
You have to look at this whole situation through that lens, through the context of time.
you absolutely do, and a lot of context of time is being left out of this whole discussion. All right, so we talked about Shoeless Joe Jackson. I just wanted to point out that not a lot of these people playing baseball and professional sports back then were educated, and there's a lot of talk that he got taken advantage of and kind of got almost framed to be put in this situation. And I think if there's any questioning about that at all, if you have one juror that says like, I don't know about this, then you cannot convict.
Right.
You cannot convict. So through the annals of time and history, what we know matters, context matters. And I just think this idea that like Joe Jackson is still a villain when he's been portrayed as a hero by Ray Liotta in a movie, and he's been, played by D.B. Sweeney in a movie, or whatever his name is. I'm losing track of my Sweeneys. I just think it's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to like take this stand that he's still a villain in all of this somehow. He hit the only home run in the 1919 World Series. How could you say he was playing in the bag? I don't know. The whole thing seems weird. Don't even get me started on the juicers.
Oh, I don't understand why we bring that into this. This isn't about the juicers. This is about gambling.
How is these Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are not banned from baseball? Alex Rodriguez was never banned from baseball. The Houston Astros they were never banned from baseball. So Alex Cora, their manager, was suspended for 2 years
And
before
where he's at now.
the Red Sox hired him.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, he's got his own problems over there. But the point of the matter is none of these people that they're listing are even ever suspended from baseball. Period. End of story. You're comparing apples to oranges, and you know it. And I think it's really low journalism here, if that's what you want to call it. I'll call it editorialism.
Okay.
All right. Can we go to the next slide? It says, quote, "If you let him in, the floodgates are now open." Sure. Why not let all those guys in too? He hasn't done anything, to reconfigure his life. He was never seriously remorseful or rehabilitated himself by going to Gamblers Anonymous or any of that stuff. He did none of that. So again, we're judging the man. We're character assassinating here. We're talking about what he did not do. Like what? He didn't get on his knees and apologize like everyone else that gets forgiven in United States culture.
Yeah. What happened to the culture of second chances?
Exactly. So he could have possibly opened the door for a second chance, but it's moot because he didn't do any of that stuff. So it's not even a point to discuss. I mean, when we are caught doing something that we shouldn't be, I think many people can relate to a situation like that. Mm-hmm. Whether we're kids or not, I think even if you get a speeding ticket, right, you don't necessarily want to go broadcasting that out to the world. You don't necessarily say like, oh, I was wrong for doing this. I'm sorry. You kind of tend to live in denial.
Sure.
And you don't want to necessarily always acknowledge the reality of what's happened. And I think when you are someone like Pete Rose, who lived in the limelight for so long, had all these career hits, was celebrated, carried off the field, like all this happened. And then you just don't see it the same way, right? You think you can walk on water a little bit maybe, and I feel like people are punishing him extra hard for that when it's like
I think he thought his accomplishments will speak for themselves. That the other stuff that he did is gonna be overlooked because of his accomplishments.
right, but they're focusing on this remorsefulness aspect of this story, and I think that it's not as easy as they say. It's not as easy as it is. He's embarrassed. You know, like he knows he did wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone that knows they did wrong is embarrassed. That's a fact. When you have this kind of situation, when you have all these light bulbs and cameras on you and eyeballs watching you, we don't know what that feels like. None of us can know what that feels like. Pete Rose knew what it felt like. And maybe his response is how we would all respond if we were that famous and be thrust into this kind of a scandal. I don't even think Bill Clinton had it this bad when the Monica Lewinsky stuff happened.
No, he's still being trotted around. Like
he is. He never got banished from politics. Well, I'm just saying.
That would have been great, maybe.
But world would be a different place, wouldn't it?
Yeah, maybe we had more media outlets.
Anyways, I just feel like, again, this is Giamatti speaking. This is not any of Bob Nightingale's editorial words. But this person, he has a real bone with Pete Rose. Maybe, it's personal for him.
Right. I think maybe Pete Rose should have apologized to him or asked for his forgiveness.
Well, he could have, maybe. That would have been, I'm sorry your dad died 8 days after he prosecuted me.
Karma? Who knows?
Who knows? People will probably have their own theories and opinions, and, you know, depending on whose side you fall on, it might determine which side of the belief you fall on when it comes to the baseball gods and real God. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or church God. All the gods are real, everybody.
Yeah.
Including the Viking ones.
Yeah.
Thor's coming to say something about what's been going on.
That would be nice.
Odin's judgment has been passed upon you.
With some crows.
How would Odin
ravens.
rule on the Pete Rose situation?
Well, considering that Odin probably gambled himself. I don't know.
Odin loved to gamble on a good god fight, right?
Oh, yeah.
He probably had his own sons duke it out, only to wager, who knows? All right, let's continue the article here. Rose's reinstatement, of course, doesn't automatically put him into the Hall of Fame. Wait, it doesn't?
Wait, really?
The way you're talking and the way you're acting, it's like it's a foregone conclusion already.
Yeah.
Jeez. He still must be elected, even though Donald Trump, who met with Manfred on April 16th, believes that it will be fait accompli, saying on X, quote, this is Donald Trump, baseball, which is dying all over the place, should get off its fat, lazy ass and elect Pete Rose, even though far too late, into the Baseball Hall of Fame, exclamation point, end quote.
Where is it going to be a beautiful ceremony? We missed that quote.
I'm guessing Trump might come if he gets elected in and show up. I predict if Pete Rose does indeed get elected into the Hall of Fame, and I think it's probably about a 99% chance that he does right now, Donald Trump and more people than ever will attend that ceremony.
That's a good bet. But that's not going to happen till 2 years from now. Not
2027. Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. Let's continue here. Rose, who was never on the official Baseball Writers Association of America ballot, Baseball Writers Association of America ballot, can now be nominated by the Hall of Fame's Historical Overview Committee. Notice that this is not the baseball writers. This is what I mentioned earlier. This is a Historical Overview Committee and placed on the 2027 Classic Baseball Era Committee ballot. He would need at least 12 votes by the 16-member committee made up of 4 former players, 4 executives, 4 writers, and 4 historians to be elected and inducted in the summer of 2028.
Oh, 28.
So we have this interesting situation now, and you can see the breakdown of who is going to be I guess, deciding upon Pete Rose's fate and possibly Shoeless Joe Jackson and other 1919 Chicago White Sox players. And this is all going to happen, and we'll know, I think, in January of 2028 when the Hall of Fame announcements traditionally happen, if that is going to be on the 2028 ticket. If Pete Rose and other players from this era, from this suspension or this punishment will get finally a chance to see the light of day. The article goes on, quote, "I'd love to be on that committee," said a former all-star outfielder whose career overlapped with Rose. Quote, "I would vote no in a heartbeat and try to convince everyone to do the same. He embarrassed the game. He was a Hall of Famer on the field, but he ruined the integrity of the game off the field." So, a couple things. One, I think this is a bad journalistic decision to put a no-face quote like this into an article like this.
Oh, shock. Anonymous sources.
You want to go out on the record and say something like this?
Put your face
Put
on.
your face and your name on it.
Yeah.
Coward. I don't care what all-star you are. You're a coward. Put your name on it. What do you care if people know that this is your opinion? It's not like the guy was really liked a lot the last few years of his life. We saw how he acted around people.
Maybe he's afraid of ghosts.
Ghosts of baseball past. Well, there's a few ghosts that probably have a bone to pick with this person today. I think the funny thing is he says the truest part out loud. He says he was a Hall of Famer on the field. Okay, so why are we bringing this other stuff into it?
Because there's nothing else to talk about. Were you going to talk about his stats? They are amazing.
I think the Hall of Fame does not disclude storytelling. And it's up to everyone else to remind people that Pete Rose didn't get to live through this. He didn't get to enjoy this in his life, and that is the lesson. That is the punishment. That is the hardship that one must endure when they do something of this caliber of badness. Pete Rose didn't kill anybody. He killed himself, probably. He hurt himself more than anybody in all of this. He lived a lifetime of a punishment since I was alive, since 1989. 36 years of punishment?
It's a long time.
How old was he? 83? 36? Do the math. I'm not so quick on my mathematical skills, but 47 years old, if I'm mathing correctly in my head on the fly. And that's a pretty damn harsh punishment. I'm 43. If I did something and I had to live with it for the next 36 years, that's a long time. That's a long punishment. And then to die and not have anything change. You never get that moment in the glory that you want so bad. And we all know Pete Rose wanted it so bad. So I have a problem with this quote in this article. And this is what I was kind of starting to talk about, that I feel like Bob Nightingale had an agenda by putting this article out so quickly, so soon after this decision was made, and ignoring a lot of the actual decision that was made. They start leaping to Bonds and Clemens and all this other stuff that's happened when he didn't do that. He just said your banishment ends upon death. What is so hard about that to understand?
More drama showcasing. That's it, really.
Well, if you continue to the next slide, I kept the picture up there, but the paragraph underneath says, said a former GM who is also a candidate to be on the committee. Oh. So this is somebody that could actually decide Pete Rose's fate, apparently. Quote, this guy was jeopardizing players' careers to win bets as a manager. He could care less about their health, and now you're going to validate someone like this, someone who's, quote, also accused of statutory rape. Again, you end with the character assassination of things that happened off the baseball field that, again, really should have no bearing on whether or not he gets put into the Hall of Fame or not.
Okay, I'm sorry, but if he was being accused of statutory rape, why no charges were brought up? Why nothing ever happened with that? So you just slinging dirt and see what sticks?
Well,
And the context of time again.
it's a smear campaign reminder kind of thing. He admitted he slept with this girl. He said she was 16 at the time in 2017. I mean, my grandpa told me stories about what he did when he was 20, and they were so far-fetched and unbelievable. Like, could you imagine what a guy that played Major League Baseball might want to spin? Or I don't know. Jeez, I just think this is a little bit silly and ridiculous, and I don't want to take anything away from the concept of rape or anything like that. Like, it's a horrible thing, and I don't condone it by any means. It's just that I feel that we're going way far back here, and it's just one of those, like, did Bill Clinton, again, Monica Lewinsky, did he take it? This is kind of similar situation to me, right? It's like a young teenage girl probably wanted to sleep with Pete Rose just as much as he wanted to sleep with her.
They had
just like
groupies.
Monica Lewinsky wanted to give Bill Clinton the full Monty in the White House, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
So again, we have another person that doesn't want to put their face on their quotes and their name on their quotes. So to this former GM and potential candidate to be on the committee, I challenge you to divorce your feelings about the personal matter and how you feel about the person, and start to be just objective as a judge and jury should be.
Maybe they are projecting.
Well, if I had a decision, you would not be on the committee because you're incapable of divorcing yourself from what obviously are very strong feelings about the matter.
Fair enough.
All right. The article continues, quote, "You let Pete get away with this. You're opening yourself up to the biggest gambling scandal in baseball history. It makes Rule 21 a complete joke." And in parentheses, it says prohibiting players, umpires, and other league officials from betting on any baseball game. That's Rule 21. We talked about it already. So, again, who can bet on baseball? Nobody. You will still get suspended for life. You will still carry this punishment. You will never get to be alive and see yourself inducted into the Hall of Fame if you are caught doing this. So what has changed? Why is it a complete joke? I don't understand. Manfred, after rejecting Rose's bid to be reinstated while he was alive, became the first commissioner since the suspension to even seriously consider lifting the lifetime ban. What is this is so ridiculous. I'm not even the world's biggest Rob Manfred defender, you know. I like some of the things he's done with modern baseball. I don't like some of the other things he's done with modern baseball. I look at each decision he makes arbitrarily. But the fact that you are painting him in this bad of a light while Bud Selig, a previous commissioner after Bart Giamatti died, the fact is that this whole entire situation could have been, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here.
Okay.
I had a phone call. The fact that you ignored the fact that you ignore Bud Selig and the person who oversaw the entire steroids era of baseball and didn't do a damn thing about it until it was far too late. I don't know what to say. You know, I feel like you're wanting on one hand to say that they're opening up the floodgates to Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, and then on the other hand, you want to say that this is that you ignore Bud Selig's role as commissioner in the steroid era. And now you're actually saying that he's of better caliber than Rob Manfred is. Rob Manfred didn't oversee the steroid era.
This guy did.
You're mad at Rob Manfred right now because he made a decision that you don't like about basically players being banished for life after they die.
Yeah.
And whether that banishment should continue or not. That's the only thing he ruled on and changed. And you don't like that decision because it affects so many things. But it does not open up the floodgate for these other steroid players to get in the game, like you're actually saying in your article. That is not true. That is not happening. And furthermore, you ignore Bud Selig when you start saying he's the first commissioner since the suspension to even seriously consider lifting the lifetime ban. That's not even true. Like Mike Schmidt and Pete Rose went into Bud Selig's office, and there's people that said if he would have been more remorseful, that it would have gotten changed back then. So you're ignoring that too.
Wow, how convenient.
How convenient, Bob. Giamatti was the one who suspended Rose. Fay Vincent, who succeeded Giamatti after his sudden death, remained strongly opposed against Rose's ban ever being lifted before he died in February. Bud Selig, who replaced Vincent and was commissioner from 1992 to 2015, 23 years, also has continued to voice his strong opposition against Rose's reinstatement. Quote, this is from Robert Manfred. It's interesting that he says Bud Selig's name and then he starts a quote, but you don't know it's Manfred until the middle.
Oh.
Quote, it is my preference not to disturb decisions made by prior commissioners, Manfred said. Quote, Mr. Rose was not placed on the permanently ineligible list by commissioner action, but rather as the result of a 1989 settlement of potential litigation with the commissioner's office. My decision today is consistent with Commissioner Giamatti's expectations of that agreement. So, yeah, this is, again, we're going back to the beginning of all this conversation, but this was the lawyer statement, right? Mm-hmm. This was the fact that he just went and changed the meaning of something because the word kind of implies lifetime.
Why are you
not
living?
Death time.
Right. Lifetime means why are you still alive, not after your death.
And that is what those other commissioners used as language too. They said lifetime. They didn't say lifetime and eternity.
And it's not even technicality. It's just looking at the words as it says. You're not changing the meaning of the word. You're still using the same word. You're just implementing it.
100%.
That's all there is. Nothing has changed.
Nothing really has changed. It's just that they've been reinstated. That has changed because the
rules haven't changed.
But the word and the definition of the word really haven't changed.
Right.
They just are acknowledging the definition of the word.
Exactly.
But they never said that you are banished for life and eternity.
And your children.
They said you're banished for life.
Nothing. Like, they don't expect children to pay for the sins of their fathers.
It's a really smart argument when you think about it.
Yeah.
It was a really good argument. And I don't give Manfred all his credit all the time. So you know that I'm genuine when I say
yes.
It was a really good argument. All right. Manfred argues that the lifetime ban was severe enough punishment and denies being persuaded by Trump to lift the ban, saying that Rose's family visited him in December when he informed them he would reevaluate it. Besides, MLB says they're not putting Rose into the Hall of Fame. That now falls on the museum, which announced in 1991 that no player permanently banned from baseball is eligible, and the voters. So this is how baseball's kind of gotten around this pickle. Is like, well, we're banning the player, and the Hall of Fame's like, we can't induct banned players. And so now that they're unbanned by baseball, it's like, okay, now they can be inducted again, I guess.
I think they define the rule, not the rules. They define the words, the meaning of certain words. And now the definition has been implemented, and this is the result.
100%. I want to revisit the first part of this because I agree with him. The lifetime ban is severe enough punishment.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't get to live through your own induction.
That's a punishment.
It is. You want to talk about unfairly punished is like you have guys like Ron Santo that never got elected and never did anything wrong. And then they had to die only to get inducted. You know, those are the true tragedies in life that we don't talk about even enough. But all right. We'll see. So the Hall of Fame is now the gatekeepers of this whole thing. We're going to continue the article here. It says, in its announcement, MLB shared a clip from Bart Giamatti's 1989 press conference where the commissioners stressed that it was the, quote, responsibility of the Baseball Writers Association of America to, quote, decide who goes into the Hall of Fame. Quote, you have the authority and the responsibility, and you will make your own individual judgments, Bart Giamatti told assembled media members. As a devoted reader, I look forward to listening and watching your debates on the relationship of life and art, which you will all have to work out for yourselves. I don't think there's anything wrong with Bart Giamatti's statement or sentiment or feelings here. You know, like it's an honorable definition of, I think, what you want people to vote on, right? And how you want people to vote. But I don't know. I feel like that's a lot of responsibility for these. From what I know about media now as an adult and someone that's worked in media and seen how it can be manipulated and used as a weapon, I don't know. Maybe there should be a different process for this. It's probably too late in the game to ever change that, but who knows? Said Manfred in his statement, quote, Commissioner Giamatti's comments were completely reasonable given that, at the time, the Hall of Fame did not have a rule barring people on the permanently ineligible list from Hall of Fame consideration, which he's correct about. We just said that happened in 1991. Pete Rose was banned in 1989. Baseball's most recent commissioner, Bud Selig, also issued a statement supporting MLB's actions and suggested that Bart Giamatti would have respected what Manfred chose to do. Quote, I understand and respect his decision, Selig said. Given my affection for my friend, the late Bart Giamatti, MLB's seventh commissioner who disciplined Mr. Rose for gambling on his own team all those years ago, I believe Bart would understand and respect the decision as well. So this is really interesting contrast to what Bart Giamatti's own son is kind of spinning in earlier in this article, right? Here you have somebody who said that they were a dear friend of the late commissioner, and it makes sense because he succeeded him. But I don't know. He did not directly succeed him, by the way, but he did become commissioner in 1992, 3 years after Bart Giamatti was commissioner. So it's just an interesting contrast, right? Obviously, the son, I think, carries a lot of weight with the fact that his father died so close to this decision. And I think he feels like it probably played a role in his early death. And Bud Selig, as a former commissioner, is able to bring a more, I guess, unbiased reflection to the situation, including one that he had to make his own self. Ugly time for the game. It's like there's no rules, Marcus Giamatti says. It's like once you die, you can be reinstated and they'll let you back in. There won't be any asterisk or anything. You're supposed to consider character, sportsmanship, and integrity. He doesn't check any of those boxes. So I get this argument and I get where he's coming from, but I don't understand that there's no rules, because there are rules. These players can still be suspended for gambling on baseball. An umpire lost his job in the offseason because his friend used his phone to bet on a baseball game or used their dual account or something. I don't know. But to say that there's no rules is really dishonest. It's a really dishonest take, and that's why I have such a problem with it. And it's not like once you die, you can be reinstated and they'll let you back in. And we know that this has to go through a process. There's going to be 16 people voting on this before it happens. So there's going to be plenty of checks and balances on this kind of decision, don't you think?
Yes. This is cherry picking information. That's all.
You're supposed to consider character, sportsmanship, and integrity. He doesn't check any of those boxes. You know, I think this is the one part of the argument that I think is what could cost Pete Rose, honestly, is because I don't think he's incorrect in this. And if those committee members decide that character, sportsmanship, and integrity are just as important as the on-the-field numbers, well, a couple things. One, Pete Rose might be doomed. And B, there's probably a lot of other players that are in the Hall of Fame that need to have their records gone through a little bit more thoroughly and checked for character, sportsmanship, and integrity.
It's not going to happen.
I know.
So
I don't think Pete's going to get denied either, honestly.
I don't think so.
There's a lot riding on that decision in a lot of people's minds. All right. Besides Rose's admission to gambling on baseball, he was accused by an unidentified woman in a defamation lawsuit filed by Rose against former federal prosecutor John Dowd that he had a sexual relationship with her before she was 16 years old. Rose, married with 2 children at the time, acknowledged the relationship in court documents made public in 2017, but said she was 16 years old, which was the age of consent. So we talked about this a little bit already, and there's been already mentions of statutory rape in this column, and so this is the first full-fledged explanation of that incident, if I'm correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it just seems like it comes right after this character and integrity comment, and so it's definitely making an argument that he didn't have any, and that he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame because of this. So again, if we're not banning Bill Clinton from politics, I don't know. I don't see a lot of differences culturally between that and this, I guess. It's like they both took advantage of each other. They all took advantage of each other, probably. I don't know, but
Different contexts, different times. We have to look at this through that lens. We can't look at this stuff through modern view of things that we have at the moment.
we cannot.
Things change. Cultures change. It takes time, but they do change.
100%.
We used to get married when you were 12.
We did. Probably not a good decision, knowing what we
No.
know about the human brain and how it's not done developing until you're 25.
Exactly. So things do change.
They do. All right. Well, we're almost at the end here, everybody. It says, quote, "I don't think they want to talk to me and hear what I have to say or what we went through as a family with the tremendous amount of pressure, the death threats that the FBI still has, and all of the backlash my dad faced. It was really an ugly time. Now it's going to be an ugly time for the game with everything that my father fought to uphold in peril." And again, I just have to say, like, what is in peril here? Like, there's nothing is changing. If you get caught using performance-enhancing drugs, tomorrow you are suspended. If you get caught gambling on baseball, tomorrow you are suspended for life. There is nothing that is changing this fact from happening. The only thing that has changed is upon death, you are reinstated and are given a chance to be judged by your peers in the game. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, it's a clarification of a word. That's it.
So with
Okay.
that, I wanted to talk about Joe Jackson again for a little bit of a second. I dug up this old picture of him, splashed some color on it. I wanted to, celebrate the fact that he might actually get to have a chance in Cooperstown. If you look at the next slide, look at these numbers from his day. 62.2 WAR, 54 home runs. He was the one of the trailblazers with home run hitting before Babe Ruth. These were the kind of numbers people put up in their career.
And this is without having batting cages, without training.
Sure.
This is just coming to the field and trying to hit a baseball.
Yeah, this was farm food only.
Well, farm food is the best, but
You can see he played here 12 years. He died in 1951, so he's been dead for a really long time when it comes to this whole new rule that I guess the commissioner has instated. So, 356 career batting average. Who knows what his numbers would have looked like if he would have not been kicked out of baseball because he was only 32 years old. Well, 33, but only 33 in 73 days. By the way, he hit 12 home runs in 1920 out of those 54. So who knows? Maybe he would have found that power stroke even more.
Yeah.
And there's a really great picture of him and Babe Ruth, a young Babe Ruth, and sitting and talking together.
were they gambling? Just kidding.
They were not, but Ruth was in a Yankees uniform already, so the trade had happened.
Oh.
But yeah. He we can see on the next slide the full career numbers. You can just look at some of these monster seasons. .551 slug, 1.011 OPS for the entire season. And that's not with a lot of homers. That's with 7 home runs. The other thing is he had 17 triples. So
he got on base.
He got on base, 39 doubles, 197 hits, 80 walks. Definitely got on base. Yes, was a great player, 62.2 WAR, and we'll see what happens with his candidacy and some of the other Black Sox as well. But I want to turn my attentions at the end of this to somebody that I was thinking about yesterday in all of this, and somebody whose name has still not come up, Nika.
Okay.
And that is Jim Devlin. Do we have his slide up? Jim Devlin, as you can see, was born in 1849 and died at the age of 34 in 1883.
So that's before all these things we were talking, before Joe Jackson.
50 years almost before the whole Black Sox scandal. This person is known to me because I, as a young person, watched Ken Burns' Baseball, the documentary, and Jim Devlin's story stood out to me as a young child when I watched this documentary. And yesterday, when all this news was breaking, I said to Nika, what about Jim Devlin? And I still have not seen his name come up. Let's quickly talk about Jim Devlin and his story. Look at those career numbers. 32.9 WAR, 72 wins, 76 losses. There's a reason for that. 1.90 ERA, very good. 157 games, 153 games started. 1,405 innings pitched, 286 strikeouts, a 1.087 career whip. That's really good. You can see, if you look a little closer, his last game was at the age of 28. And that's because Jim Devlin, after the 1877 season, was suspended for life by the National League at the time. There was no American League, and there was no Commissioner of Baseball's office or anything like that. But there was a National League president.
Okay, so was this one league?
This was one league.
Okay.
And Jim Devlin was a member of the Louisville, what was their team name? Oh, boy.
I don't see it.
I don't know why I'm blanking out on this one. That sucks. The Louisville Grays. Thank you. All right. The Louisville Grays. And Nika, can we switch to the next slide with these are his full career stats. Look at this. I pointed out that WAR number of 32.7 because look at this. He only played 3 seasons of professional baseball. And 17.7 and 13.2 WAR in 1876 and 1877, respectively. 68 games started, 66 complete games.
He was a pitcher.
He was. 622 innings pitched, 559 innings pitched. I mean, I'm just looking at these 2 seasons and going through the numbers a little bit. You can see them. The whip, 1.177, 0.96. I mean, these are Yamamoto numbers that we saw over the first month. I was really sad not to see Jim Devlin's name mentioned yesterday. When I was a kid and I watched the Ken Burns Baseball documentary, I learned that Jim Devlin and 3 of his teammates on the Louisville Grays were the first 4 men suspended from Major League Baseball for life for betting on baseball.
So who had the authority to suspend them? The president?
The National League president did it at the time, and he very famously, Jim Devlin, apparently begged and pleaded on his hands and knees, and he did the whole apology tour. He did what Pete Rose never did.
Okay.
And that's why I think people are still mad at him, is because he never got down on his hands and knees and said, "Hey, please forgive me." It was only for his benefit. It was like he admitted finally that he bet on baseball like a week before the book came out that he wrote that was admitting that he bet on baseball. So people took that the wrong way.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily blame them for that. But I do think Jim Devlin should be looked at differently today because Jim Devlin did all the things that a lot of people are mad that Pete Rose didn't do.
Okay, so in your opinion, the reason that his name wasn't mentioned or wasn't brought up with those 17 guys that get cleared up now is because there was no commissioner.
Well, no, I'm not necessarily saying that. I guess so. I don't know. That's what I'm confused about a little bit is because their names weren't on this list, and yet I feel like by definition they should have been. And I don't understand if there's some kind of, again, technicality. We've used that word a couple times on this show. I don't know if there's some kind of technicality that is sort of causing this to happen, causing this whole, I don't know.
Why omitting these 4 players versus not including them?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a great question right now, I think. And that's a question I have. Like I said, I caught myself thinking about this person yesterday to the point where I had to like look up everything I remembered about this story. And it was all proven to be true, including like the legend that he was on his hands and knees begging for forgiveness. This was all told in chapter 1 or inning 1 of the Ken Burns baseball documentary. So if you go watch the first 2 hours of that, you'll see this story in there and you'll get all of the behind the scenes details of it. And I just think I was thinking about him yesterday. Like what about Jim Devlin? I know it goes back. 1876 was a long time ago, 150 years almost.
That is a long time.
But I do think we owe it a little bit if we're doing this to do it all the way. And that goes back to the original sin, right? This is the original sin. These were the original people that were punished for gambling. And it's okay, I guess. It's okay to forgive, I think, in these instances. They have nothing to defend themselves with anymore. They're long dead. And I really hope baseball and a lot of these writers that are acting and writing this pretentiousness that we read today, I really hope they stop and take a look in the mirror and just acknowledge their own flaws and their own mistakes and their own decisions that they've made throughout their life. And we can all admit we're not perfect. We've all done things that we regret. And we're still here. We're still breathing and we're still living. And we are all carrying those weight of those decisions with us.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think it was any different for these people, for Pete Rose, for Jim Devlin. Jim Devlin was banished from baseball at the age of 28. He was born in 1849 and apparently loved baseball all his life and begged and pleaded for forgiveness for this to be changed. It never was. He died at 34. And
wow, that is so sad.
I just think it is sad. And if we remember anybody today with all of this news, maybe we should remember Jim Devlin.
That is a really good question, and I haven't heard or seen anybody asking that question. Why these 4, or specifically him, are omitted?
I don't know. And
I don't think nobody's going to ask that question.
Jim Devlin had a huge contribution to baseball. He invented the modern-day sinker, which is thrown by a lot of pitchers. And it was called a drop pitch back then even. They didn't even call it a sinker. It was called a drop pitch. And
let's bring the name back.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool name. In 1877, Jim Devlin was the only pitcher on the roster, and he threw every pitch of his team's 61 games, the only pitcher ever to do so in a single season.
Wow.
Every pitch of his team's games. And this was the season after which he was suspended for life.
It's nuts.
Well, I just wanted someone out there to know that I and Nika were thinking of Jim Devlin today with all of this news about Pete Rose coming out. Everything's being made about Pete Rose, and I think that's the one thing that the baseball writers are missing here. Joe Jackson should be the headline today.
But
Shoeless Joe's banishment lifted should be the headline. And oh, by the way, we decided to lift Pete Rose's too by this technicality. But it's all about Pete Rose today. And there's very little limelight being put on Shoeless Joe Jackson. And there's absolutely zero mention of Jim Devlin today. And that's only true if you haven't heard this show. Because now you do know about Jim Devlin, and you might Google him and learn a little bit more about him.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point.
It looks like Dylan Cease, by the way, when he had his mustache with the White Sox a couple years ago and the short hair.
Oh, he does look like Dylan Cease.
I think Dylan Cease just looks like an 1880s ball player with that look.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, we certainly have been there and back again through the Pete Rose saga, through history, through suspensions, all the way to the Black Sox, all the way back to the Louisville Grays. Oh, what a day. What an episode.
Well, it's hot. The topic is hot.
The topic is hot, and there's lots to say about it, and lots of people have opinions, including us here on the Kanika Sports Show. So thank you.
And then we might have to bring some new information on Friday.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to keep watching and clipping. You know, everyone, like I said a second ago, has an opinion about this. And one thing I noticed before we put this topic to bed for today is that depending on which side of the line you fall on might have to do with whether or not you actually played inside the chalk lines or not. People who played the game seem to generally be coming out and saying, like, Rose needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
The writers and the people who are journalists are the ones that are saying, hold on a second. Doesn't any of this stuff matter? And
so it's the players versus the media.
It's kind of like the players versus the media a little bit in terms of where the argument lines are being set right now. So I think that's interesting to watch, and I want to basically see if my theory holds true over the next 48 hours as we get into Friday morning and see where the ball lands. So
that's a good way to look at it. And I really hope somebody brings up those two, the names you just mentioned at the end.
Yeah, indeed. All right, everybody. Well, thank you once again for joining us on this special episode of the Kanika Sports Show. We are talking all about Pete Rose today. If you're new here and you got through this whole video, then please do us a huge favor and like or subscribe. We are now doing video for the first time. It's new for us, and we really could use all your support. We have an X page. We have an Odyssey page. We have a YouTube page. We have Facebook. We are on TikTok, Spotify, Apple
Instagram.
Podcasts. We are trying to be as many places as we can and get this content out on as many avenues as possible. So please do a favor. Please do us a favor. If you like what you see, share it with some other people. And let's bring some more people on board the Kanika train here as we move forward into the 2025 season. We'll be back here with a regular episode here on Friday, talking all things baseball leading into the weekend. And, of course, about Fernando's walk-off home run last night and all the other walk-offs that happened at the same time last night. So we'll be walking it off to Friday right now. Adios, everybody. This is Kenny signing off.
Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Adios.